At our family anniversary dinner, my dad leaned in, napkins still in his hand. "Tell me, the $200,000 I gave you, what did you do with it?" The words landed heavy, slicing clean through the low hum of conversation. Forks hovered above plates. Someone's glass stopped halfway to their lips. My mother's practiced smile faltered just for a heartbeat, and my brother's color drained so fast it was almost frightening. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, but I didn't shrink. I didn't rush to explain. I looked straight at him and asked evenly, "What money?" The chandelier above us buzzed faintly, casting sharp light across faces that suddenly didn't know where to look. One of them looked panicked, the other looked guilty. I unlocked my phone, opened a folder I'd prepared long before this night, and slid it across the table. My father's eyes widened as he scrolled. That wasn't what he expected to see. The night before that dinner, I had still been in my Seattle apartment, surrounded by fabric swatches, campaign outlines, and half-finished branding proposals spread across my dining table. My life there was quiet, orderly, built brick by brick with no one's help but my own. I paid my own rent, answered to my own clients, and lived without borrowing favors or asking permission. Maybe that independence was why my father, Robert Bennett, always told people I reminded him of himself. He ran a small construction company in Portland, prided himself on grit and hard work, and every phone call with me ended the same way. "I'm proud of you, Lucy." He never said that to my brother. Jason Bennett, 3 years older, charming when it suited him, ambitious in theory but careless in practice, had burned through loans, opportunities, and patience. Somehow he always landed safely because our mother, Elaine, softened every fall. She called him her dreamer. I was the dependable one, which really meant I absorbed the consequences when things went wrong. When Jason called me a week earlier, his voice had been gentle in a way that felt rehearsed. "Hey, Dad's not feeling great. We might cancel the anniversary dinner." "Cancel?" I asked. "He just emailed me about the wine order." There was a pause on the line. He said Dad was tired, that it might be better if I skipped this one. The silence that followed told me more than his words ever could. My father wouldn't miss his own celebration without telling me himself. So I called him. He answered quickly, cheerful, excited, already talking about the decorations your mother set up. "You're still coming, right?" That was the moment Jason's lie settled in my chest like a stone. On the flight to Portland, I tried to make excuses for him. Maybe insecurity, maybe resentment, maybe Mom was trying to keep the peace. But beneath all of it was a sense of something carefully arranged, something hidden. When I arrived, the Bennett house looked unchanged. White siding, trimmed hedges, pine-scented candles burning in every room. Mom greeted me with a hug that felt practiced. Jason appeared behind her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. For the first time in years, I felt like a visitor instead of a daughter. The next morning, the house gleamed with almost uncomfortable perfection. Dad laughed over breakfast, talking about a new deck project. He looked healthy, energized. Jason barely ate, scrolling through his phone, tense. When Dad stepped away, Mom leaned toward me and asked that we avoid talking about money that night. "Your brother's under a lot of stress." Her hands shook as she adjusted her mug. That wasn't stress, that was fear. Later, while setting the table, I overheard Jason arguing quietly on the phone. "I'll pay it next week. Stop calling me." When he saw me, he snapped the phone away and brushed it off as business. After he left, I noticed envelopes on the counter, receipts tucked inside, one addressed to an investment firm I recognized, the same firm that handled my father's accounts. That evening, I slipped into my old bedroom and saw the bank alert waiting on my phone. $200,000 completed. My name attached. My breath caught. The transfer came from a joint account I hadn't seen in years. Jason Bennett. I didn't sleep that night. I followed the trail of transactions, the slow build-up, the final withdrawal. By morning, the truth was undeniable. When I confronted my mother, she didn't deny it. She pleaded. "He needed help. You wouldn't miss it." Those words hollowed something out of me. I left before she could say more and drove to Aunt Marjorie's diner where truth was served without decoration. She handed me proof she'd kept without knowing why. When I showed it to Dad's lawyer, she didn't hesitate. This is fraud. You need to protect yourself. So I waited. I gathered everything, and when the night came, when Mom set the table and Jason poured the wine with shaking hands, I took my seat at the far end, my phone beside my plate, ready. The dinner began like every other family celebration. Too much wine, too many polite laughs, and just enough tension to choke on. The chandelier above the table cast soft gold light across a feast my mother had curated like a magazine spread. Roasted salmon, lemon tart, silverware so polished it reflected our faces back at us. Dad looked genuinely happy. His cheeks were pink, his laugh loud, and his eyes soft when they landed on me. "Lucy," he said, pouring me a glass, "I still can't believe you flew in just for this." I smiled, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Jason sat across from me, tapping his thumb against the table, his smile too bright, too wide. Every so often, he'd glance at Mom and she'd give him a small nod, as if keeping time in some unspoken rhythm of secrets. For an hour, it almost felt normal. Stories about Dad's business, Marjorie teasing him about his new gray hair. I almost let myself believe the worst was behind me, but the lie sat between us, heavy and waiting. Then Dad leaned forward, napkin still in his hand, voice calm but deliberate. "Tell me, Lucy," he said, "the $200,000 I gave you, what did you do with it?" The laughter died mid-air. The room froze. Forks hovered. My heart slammed once against my ribs, then stopped. "What?" I whispered. He didn't blink. "The $200,000. I transferred it months ago. Your brother said you were using it for something private, but now I want to hear it from you." My mother's face went rigid. Jason's hand tightened around his wineglass. I swallowed, feeling heat crawl up my neck. "What? $200,000? Silence. The chandelier hummed overhead, the sound of its faint buzz suddenly deafening. Then Jason laughed, too loud, too forced. "Come on, Dad. Lucy's probably forgotten. She's got so much going on in Seattle." Dad's gaze cut to him. "Forgotten? 200,000 isn't pocket change." Jason's smile faltered. I could feel every guest watching us, pretending not to listen. Even Aunt Marjorie stopped mid-sip, her eyes narrowing. "I never received that money," I said, finally steadying my voice. "If you sent it, I didn't see a cent." Dad's brow furrowed. "I have the confirmation, Lucy. Same account you used for the business fund. It was your name." I took a slow breath, forcing calm over the storm in my chest. "Then maybe you should look closer at who else had access to it." Mom stiffened. "Robert, not here." He turned toward her, confused. "Why not? If there's a problem, we can fix it." Jason set his fork down, the clink sharp in the silence. "Dad, it's not a big deal. I can explain." "Explain what?" I asked, cutting him off. My eyes locked on his. "The transfer you made using my name, or the hotel bills that came right after?" He froze. Dad turned to me sharply. "What are you talking about?" I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and opened the folder. My hands were steady now. I slid the screen across the table toward him. "Here, every transaction, the same account, same timestamp, but authorized from Jason's IP address. Receipts, payments, even screenshots of his calls with the investment firm." Dad scrolled, his face draining of color. "Jason, you did this." Jason's voice cracked. "Dad, please, it's not what you think. I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back." "Borrowed?" My father's voice rose, sharp and cold. "You forged your sister's access and stole her money." Mom shot up from her chair. "Robert, stop yelling. He made a mistake." "A mistake?" Dad snapped. "Elaine, you knew?" She hesitated, tears in her eyes. "He was drowning in debt, Robert. I thought if Lucy never found out, no one would get hurt." I laughed, the sound bitter. "You thought I'd never find out? You signed my name. You let him take everything." Jason stood, hands trembling. I was desperate, Lucy. I didn't mean to ruin anything. Desperate enough to let Dad accuse me of theft? My voice broke. You sat there and watched me get humiliated for something you did. The guests were silent now. No more chatter, no clinking glasses, just the sound of my father breathing, slow and furious. He turned to my mother. You two planned this. Robert, please, she whispered. It was for our family. He slammed his hand against the table, the plates rattling. No, Elaine, family doesn't lie. Family doesn't steal. Jason's voice shrank. Dad, don't do this. We can fix it. Dad took out his phone. You're right, we can. He dialed without hesitation. Yes, I need to report a theft. $200,000. My mother's scream was instant. Robert, stop! Don't do this to him. He didn't even look at her. He did this to himself. Jason sank back into his chair, his hands over his face. The lights flickered, the hum of the chandelier turning into a soft electric drone. I sat there quietly, my pulse steady. 30 minutes later, the police arrived. Their flashlights cut across the glass, red and blue lights spinning through the window. The room looked smaller, almost colorless now. Jason didn't fight when they asked him to stand. Mom begged, sobbing, clutching his arm, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Dad signed the statement without a word. When he looked at me, there was no pride this time, just heartbreak. Lucy, he said, voice rough. I'm sorry. I shook my head. You believed what they told you. You had every reason to. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away gently. You wanted to know what I did with your money, I said. I protected it from them. The officers led Jason out. Mom followed, shouting promises that no one believed anymore. The door slammed behind them, leaving only silence and the faint echo of sirens fading into the night. Aunt Marjorie came over, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she whispered. I looked down at the folder still open on the table, the screen dimming. Maybe, I said softly, but it doesn't feel like it. Dad sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. I raised them both, he muttered. How did we end up here? I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the lights of the patrol car reflected off the window, the same cold shimmer that had once come from our chandelier. And in that moment, I realized something simple and final. Sometimes justice doesn't sound like victory, it just sounds like silence. The weeks after that dinner felt unreal, like walking through a house that still smelled like smoke after the fire's gone. Portland was quiet, the headlines faded, the whispers around town did not. Jason's name came up in court documents, then in pitying conversations my mother could no longer control. Dad handled everything through Caroline, Ross, his lawyer. The charges were clear: identity fraud, unauthorized transfer of funds. Jason avoided jail through a plea deal, but the restitution order was firm: pay back every cent or lose everything he owned. Mom stood beside him at every hearing, her face hollow, her hair unkempt for the first time in my life. When it was over, Dad called me into his office at home. The desk that used to hold his blueprints was now covered in paperwork. I've rewritten my will, he said quietly. The company, the house, everything. It's yours. They'll get nothing. I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Maybe it wasn't revenge. Maybe it was his way of saying sorry. By the end of the month, Jason had sold his car, his watches, even the designer furniture Mom had bragged about for years. They moved to a rented duplex on the edge of town. I heard about it from Aunt Marjorie, not from them. When I left for Seattle again, Dad helped me load my bags into the car. The sky was gray, soft rain misting the driveway. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a single check, $800,000, the same amount he'd once meant for my future. You deserve your clean start, he said. Go build something you're proud of. As I drove north, the city lights of Portland disappeared in the rearview mirror. What replaced them wasn't peace, not yet, just clarity. 6 months later, I stood in front of my boutique in downtown Seattle. Harbor Line Studio. The sign still smelled of fresh paint. Inside, sunlight spilled across racks of tailored jackets and silk scarves, each tag handwritten with my initials. The $800,000 my father gave me had turned into more than a business. It was a quiet reclamation of everything I'd lost. Dad visits sometimes, bringing coffee and that same proud half-smile he used to give me when I was little. Aunt Marjorie says the store feels like closure. Maybe she's right. I haven't heard from Mom or Jason in months. Their restitution payments come in slowly, small, mechanical reminders of what greed costs. Sometimes when I close up at night, I think about that dinner table, the hum of the chandelier, the silence after truth hit. Betrayal doesn't always destroy you. Sometimes it sharpens you. If you've ever had to defend your name against your own family, tell me your story in the comments.